Lawyers have read it. What is a detail that your client failed to bring up to you that completely lost you the case? Story 1. Employment law matter. He claimed to have been unfairly dismissed over bogus performance management. The real reason? He organized via Craigslist to have someone collect a box of his bodily fluid from a children's playground. There were explicit messages from him asking what they did with it and whether they rubbed it all over themselves. The employer provided us the messages. Edit. He was doing this on company time. Story 2. It's not crazy per se, but I was representing a defendant on a larceny charge that he swore he did not do. Well, lo and behold, the police had conducted an undercover sting and had extensive video of my client allegedly stealing the very thing he swore he did not. The cherry on top? My client wore the exact same outfit from the video, down to the jacket and hat, to court. Story 3. This is so minor compared to what other people experience, especially since I work in a very tame area of law. But our office was supposed to receive a payment from an insurance company, and then we would take our portion and issue a check to the client for the remainder. From there, we would also receive monthly checks for the client and do the same thing. We had not received it yet, and I had a call with the client to flag for him. There was a chance the insurance company messed up and sent the check to him instead of us. He asked me a bunch of different questions about what would happen if he got the check himself, etc. 10 minutes later, I am wrapping the call up and tell him that I will keep him updated on if we do end up receiving the check, and he goes, "You are not going to get the check. I have it right here." He tells me he is not going to pay us until we get the issue sorted with the insurance company and insured checks are sent to us. The next day he makes me call him again and goes, "You are not going to change anything about the checks. I want them coming to me." I was quite literally too stunned to speak at that point, and he started rambling about how he should not have to pay us every month and our fee is ridiculous. We end up having to resend him the retainer agreement he signed and explain again what the contingency agreement means. My attorney finally just tells him to pay the initial fee and he can drop our services. He has the audacity to ask, "What if I need help with my case?" My attorney explains that is what the contingency agreement was in place for, so we would not help him if he drops. Ultimately, he pays us and decides to not continue with our services. 2 weeks later, this man emails me and asks me to review something for his case. I hit him with the, "We do not represent you, so we can't answer this." And he responds, "I am fine with arranging an hourly agreement in the future if I need you to answer questions for me." Sir, that is not how any of this works. Anyways, not that bad, but he certainly raised my blood pressure and I will never forget him. Story 4. I am a court-appointed attorney for qualifying individuals in family matters. Termination of parental rights case. I have been fighting to argue that parent is stable, working lawfully, has a suitable apartment, does not need psychotropic medication anymore, ready to be a parent, etc. After a few months of negotiating with all the parties and Department of Children, court services, we have a pre-trial to try and convince guardians. I meet with my client before the hearing to see if anything changed. Nope, all good, let's get my kids. Great, that is not happening today, but let's try. We get going in court. My client, who is super hot-headed and quick to anger, gets riled up and goes off on the guardians, screaming in open court. It does not end there, but reveals 1. That she is no longer working. 2. No longer an apartment. 3. Does not want to have a relationship with guardians, despite her kids loving them. 4. Won't send her kids pictures of the toys they miss and can't have. 5. Plans on moving out of state. 6. Thinks they can live as a family off of state aid when she gets them back, and is 4 months pregnant. All in the matter of 15 seconds. I was too shocked to even react. Speechless. Not the image of stability and parental fitness I have been trying to paint since last July. Edit. To clarify, client was working really hard to get everything right, and legitimately had everything going for her prior to this hearing. I was not making false representations or trying to get a monster reinstated. This was a true bombshell, as I did my due diligence to make sure things were on the up and up and statutory requirements were met. Things fell apart very fast, apparently. This was a very atypical situation. Parents typically do a really good job working hard to meet their requirements. Story 5. I was hired as a litigation associate right out of law school, and one of my duties was to handle all of the pro bono cases that the partners did not want to do. This generally meant I did a ton of family law, despite my main practice being in civil litigation. One of my first clients lost her 6 kids that she had birthed between the ages of 14 and 23 because they were living in the filthy basement of a 2-bedroom home, along with my client's sister's 6 kids, as well as 2 other children from some other relative. 14 kids, on a handful of dirty mattresses in a dank basement. When we interviewed everyone, we found out that the oldest male cousin, 15 years old, routinely assaulted my client's oldest daughter, 11, I think, and nobody ever bothered to stop him, despite every adult in the house knowing about it. All the adults said it was not a problem, because the 11-year-old girl wanted him to do it. When we asked the little girl why the others might have thought she wanted it, she said in the smallest voice, "If I let him do it to me, he doesn't touch any of the littler girls." Due to my client's anger issues and general stupidity, she ended up refusing to answer my calls or show up to meet with me following a hearing where she cursed out the judge. So the judge granted me a withdrawal, since there was no way I could realistically represent her if she would not talk to me. I do not actually know what happened to her, but given the million red flags I was trying to manage for her, I highly doubt she ever got her kids back. Story 6. I learned a lesson. A law school classmate asked me to help him with a case. The client did not pay her rent and moved out of her apartment, but went back a few days later to get something she left. The landlord seized her car, claiming a privilege as movable property that was on the leased property. They only had 21 days from when she abandoned the property to claim the privilege. We filed challenging the privilege and seeking damages for seizing the car. The landlord had the burden of proof. At the conclusion of his case, he had failed to prove the car was there within 21 days. If we say nothing, we win and get nominal damages. We got greedy and put the client on to prove more damages. The lawyer for the landlord asked her about the 21 days, and she denied. He then put on 9 rebuttal witnesses to prove the 21 days. I do not know why he did not call the witnesses in his case. The lesson was that to win a case, you must first not lose it. Story 7. First one that comes to mind is a Social Security disability case, mental health. I told the client at the beginning he needed to have regular appointments with his therapist, at least once a month. He assured me he did. Closer to the hearing, I request records from the therapist and get a response that the claimant has not been seen in a year. Come to find out, he was making appointments, like I advised him to, but not showing up to them. He was indignant about how he did exactly what I told him to. He had appointments scheduled once a month. Too late to withdraw. Story 8. Case as a paralegal. Negligence case. Client argued that a lack of street lights and a cyclist he could not see was responsible for him hitting a wire pole. Upon discovery, the first respondent's report indicated that they found the driver in the driver's seat, pants down, with a recording of adult content playing on the phone. It was not difficult to figure out who was negligent at that point. Story 9. Back in 1997, I was doing pool public defender work and was assigned a sexual assault case, indecent exposure, in the Community Y game room, where my client swore that he never even kissed the woman, much less exposed himself. At the preliminary hearing, she testified in detail about how he would constantly harass her and follow her around, but everyone there told her that he was harmless and just a local character. However, on this one day he seemed to be on something based on his behavior, and he dropped his pants and held his private part in his hands until she screamed and he took off. She then told the assistant district attorney that he had a bad odor coming from him and a tattoo of Jerry Garcia on his upper groin with storm clouds around him, at which point my client tells me and essentially the entire 10 by 15 precinct courtroom. That dumb, it's Zeus, not Jerry Garcia. He was held over on all charges. Story 10. Legal clinic, unemployment hearing. Client told us for 6 weeks. They fired me because I got a wage garnishment for child support. He repeated it a dozen times. Fast forward to the hearing. Judge asks, "Why did you get fired?" "Well, the owner's wife thought me and him was having intimacy. My client is a man as well, but we was not. We did not do anything but give each other handies in the cab of the truck." Clinic ended before the ruling. Story 11. I represented my husband in an unemployment compensation denial hearing. He claimed he did nothing wrong at work and deserved unemployment compensation. He even testified to it under oath when I questioned him. Under cross, his employer asks if he illegally backdated his notary stamp for a mortgage closing. He did. That was the beginning of the end of our marriage. Story 12. I had a fired client suing for wrongful termination and sexual harassment for the boss. The opposing counsel comes back with a pile of affidavits, with how the boss is the nicest man in the world, and volunteers at a cancer clinic, and is beloved by everyone, etc. I am thinking, okay, he will not be the first one with dark secrets. My client claimed she was assaulted in his office on this one date, and the boss claimed he was not there. There was supposed to be security camera footage from his office, but they could not get the footage for some technical reason, so I was like, okay, I can work with this. A cover-up. They offered a moderate settlement, which I turned down. I thought I could squeeze out a few more dollars. They then come back saying they had actually managed to recover the footage of the night in question, and forwarded it to me. Clear as day, it showed my client robbing the company safe in her boss' office while he was gone, probably helping kids with cancer somewhere. They came back with a second settlement offer of $0, which I thought was pretty generous. Story 13. A guy in prison hired me to request a modification of his sentence because he was doing very well, completing a lot of optional programs, no rule violations, etc. He had his family come in and pay and everything to get started. I asked the family and the client if he had requested modification before, because the law said that for his conviction, he could only request modification twice for any one sentence, regardless of if they were granted or denied. He swore up and down he had never filed before. You can see where this is going. After spending a few hours going over records and preparing documents, a copy of the criminal court summary, the case record basically, finally arrived. He had personally filed for modification 6 times, since he was sentenced with handwritten pleadings that were all denied. So the one he hired me for was a waste of time and would never be considered at all. Story 14. A friend of mine is a defense attorney. He was representing a guy with a lengthy record for assault. Basically, this guy took an air conditioning unit and threw it at his girlfriend. My buddy tells me he was able to get a plea deal for 1 year probation, no jail time. The judge is all ready to accept the deal when he asks the defendant if he had anything he would like to say. The defendant responds, "Yay, I do not know why they charging me with assault. I never touched her. I just threw an air conditioning unit at her. This is bullshit." The judge rescinded the plea deal because of the defendant's attitude and lack of remorse. He went to trial and got a year in jail. Story 15. I am not a lawyer, but going to law school. I worked for a defense attorney who did a lot of federal work. One of our cases was with this guy charged with sex trafficking of minors. We met him at the prison to interview him, and he swore up and down he had nothing to do with this, and that he did not even know the girls. A month or so later, heaps of evidence from the United States U.S. Attorney's Office comes in, and it is pages of Snapchat messages and texts between him and these girls. Video confessions from every co-defendant and victim, saying our guy was the ringleader. Proof of him checking in and out of different motel rooms, etc. We showed him the evidence, and he claimed his co-defendants were conspiring against him. He continued to deny everything, and wanted to go to trial, but we repeatedly told him that would not be wise because of all the evidence against him. He ended up requesting a new attorney to be appointed, claiming that we were quote, ineffective. To this day, my old boss and I reminisce about how difficult this client was when we catch up on the phone. Story 16. I have posted this one before, but a person involved in a motorcycle accident who sustained legitimate but not serious injuries. Closed-circuit television showed the incident. They were very much not at fault. They decided this was their big payday, claimed they could barely walk, had post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, serious back trouble, would never work again, the whole 9 yards. They neglected to tell their lawyer they had been working a manual labor job. 2. Riding motorcycles again. 2. Did a bungee jump. All of which we caught on video, or they documented via social media. They did not get the multi-million-pound settlement payment they expected and were pursued for fraud. It was a fun phone call after we sent the tape full of evidence. Story 17. He alleged he had an oral agreement with his 2 brothers that as soon as the brothers' Internal Revenue Service (IRS) issues were resolved, they would give him a 1/3 interest in the 2-story office building that he worked full-time on for several years to manage a substantial remodel. He forgot to mention that in his recent divorce he submitted a declaration under penalty of perjury that he had no interest in his brothers' real estate interests, specifically including the building we were fighting about, and then argued the declaration should be ignored because everyone lies in a divorce. It came to light in a mediation with a retired Court of Appeal justice. He called the justice a naive child. Story 18. To make a long story short, my ex claimed multiple crimes during a custody case without remembering the police have files they give to the courts. Obligatory. I am not an attorney. My ex lost most of her case by lying about abuse to her lawyer and the court. She pretty much said I was coming over and being removed by police all the time, which never happened even once. She was, however, removed from my property once just by her friends, just before the police arrived when she came over and attacked the house, without thinking that the cops would have files on it if it happened. Then it went to, I hit her when I was not even in the same city. I was at a wedding in a city half the country away, and had photo proof at the time. Then to top it all off, when we were in a meeting with the lawyer for child, I was discussing who I thought was a suitable supervisor with the lawyer for child, when out of nowhere she pipes up from the other end of the table with, I am in fear for my life right now. He is gonna kill me. Both the lawyer for child and I just looked at her, and the lawyer for child replied, just shut up, will you? And we went back to our discussion, ignoring her from that point on. Obviously, when she tried to bring that up in court, it was all easily disproven. Seriously, the worst person I have ever met. And that includes the baby harm doer. An asshole, but not at least honest. The stupid thing is the judge still partially sided with her, the woman who tried to harm our kid with a knife, and has some pretty severe mental issues, and gave her partial custody, despite the objections of myself, the lawyer for child, and our child welfare organization. It has not panned out well. She has since ignored the court agreements and disappeared with my daughter. I am just happy I got the Hague Convention Act order done when I did. Right now we are waiting for the next round of court. I seriously do not know how she is not in jail right now, because her crap in court was the absolute least of her crap. Story 19. I had an asylum individual hearing, a bench trial, many years ago. My client claimed he was a homosexual and feared persecution in his home country of Jamaica. Not a slam dunk, but a colorable claim, so we take it on. He showed me photos of him and his boyfriend at Gay Pride, social media posts together of them at different events, clubs, festivals, restaurants, etc. And I had spoken to his boyfriend, who told me about his love for his man. I had letters of support, of friends and family talking about their great relationship and all that jibba jabba. He swore up and down that he was a star gay. We prepared for his testimony, had his evidence in order, etc. The day of the trial, on the stand, he breaks and says he has had relations with women in the past, but only to experiment. It then comes out that he has a child. I think the kid was maybe 7 at the time. His reasoning for not mentioning this is that he is pretty much an absentee dad, so he did not consider the kid his. The child was not planned. My face dropped. We lost. He was ordered removed. He blamed us somehow. He did end up retaining us for the appeal. I am not sure what happened with that since I later left the firm. But lesson learned. Do not trust the clients. Story 20. I had a very complicated case where two tenants wanted to sue an ex-landlord for a host of reasons, most of which were not causes of action. One had already sued and won, but not what he asked for, but had not sued on all the issues, representing himself to further complicate things. They then sued together and was tossed because of the previous case. I was being hired to appeal the second case. There was a path to be able to get them something, or at least the second tenant, but would require testimony from the first tenant. Long story, but the first tenant's testimony would be vital. It was super complicated, and some minor red flags. But the landlord was clearly a scumbag, and they had some proof to show they did have a case, just not what they thought they did. Then I got a series of emails, including 10 pages of chat-generative pre-trained transformer research from the first tenant, but he was saying and speaking as though he was the second tenant. Again, long story. So I decided to look him up. It turns out he had an open felony case. He had applied for a concealed carry permit so he could carry a gun to protect himself from the landlord and anyone else who did not understand him. These are his and his mother's words. She was involved from the beginning with the client's permission. He completely and openly lied about his mental health. The sheriff did his due diligence, found out and charged him. When I asked why not one of the three told me about this, I was told it was going to be resolved anyway, so it did not matter. Needless to say, I fired both of them as clients. Story 21. When I was a new attorney, my then firm had a client who had a whole story about how he had met his wife late in life, and how he thought he had never find the right woman and he felt so fortunate. Yes, he also said this under oath at his deposition. Yes, his marriage certificate said he had no previous marriages. Then a defense attorney quietly forwarded records showing he had been married twice before with kids from two different women, and it was unclear whether there were also two actual divorces to go along with the two marriages, such that maybe his third marriage was not a thing, which among other things meant the entire loss of consortium claim went out the window. Some of you will be asking why my firm did not catch any of that in a background check, and all I can say is there are lots of reasons I moved on. When confronted, he thought this was no big deal, and had a very, "aw you got me" attitude, and wanted us to keep lying for him to the remaining defendants because, hey, he just did not think it was important. We declined. Story 22. I am actually a lawyer, but I was only watching this trial, not participating. So the case was that woman A had hit woman B in the head with a heavy beer pint at a bar, and woman B got pretty serious injuries. The defense claimed that woman A had not hit anyone with the pint, but instead had just thrown the pint into a random direction, and it happened to hit woman B in the head, thus it was an accident and not a battery. Well, the prosecution had a closed-circuit television tape from the bar, and it was shown at the trial. And the tape clearly showed in high definition as woman A walked behind woman B and smashed the pint to her head so hard that the pint shattered on impact. I looked at the defense lawyer, and his jaw literally almost hit the table. The prosecutor also noticed this and asked something along, "Thrown, eh?" And the defense lawyer said that due to technical difficulties he could not get the closed-circuit television tape open on his computer when he was reviewing the evidence. Woman A was found guilty. So yeah, I was completely dumbfounded. Story 23. I am not a lawyer yet, but I clerked for a district attorney's office throughout law school. Obviously, we do not have clients, but I will never forget this kidnapping case I worked on. It involved two Asian male defendants who were both the same age and looked relatively similar. A witness is on the stand and is asked to identify where the defendant who pushed an Uzi into his face is seated. It is clear the witness is having trouble differentiating the defendants. In a true moment of brilliance, one defendant raises his fucking hand and basically points to himself like, "Right here, bud." Hands down, the dumbest crap I had ever seen. I thought his defense attorney was going to have a brain aneurysm. Story 24. I am a guardian ad litem. I called and texted the father on one of my cases around 10 times in the weeks before the hearing. He would not call back. If he answered, he would say he was too busy to talk to me. A couple hours before the hearing, I was volunteering at my son's school for an event, and he texted me saying he was ready to talk. I let him know that I could not call. When I got to court, I found him and introduced myself. I told him I would like to talk to him after the hearing. He said, "Oh, you got time for me now?" The judge awarded temporary custody to the child's grandmother. When we left the courtroom, he starts going off about how we are all unfair against fathers. Not only did the judge award custody to the grandmother rather than the mother, but he did not really want to discuss his prior or current charges, including domestic violence, substance and gun charges that occurred in the presence of the children, lack of driver's license due to driving under the influence, or refusal to submit to the court-ordered substance test. His lack of custody was due to my bias against dads. Story 25. I work for an insurance company. A guy sued one of our insureds for, among other things, loss of consortium, which can encompass many things, but namely, the ability to have intimacy with your spouse. We had gotten surveillance on the guy and had video of him having intimacy in a car with a woman other than his wife. For whatever reason, his attorney took it to trial anyway. He continued to deny the ability to have intimacy. The video was played for the jury and the guy's wife who was at the trial. He lost the trial and his wife. Story 26. Criminal law, so I have a bunch, but one of the most blatant was my client, who said he was not there at all, and a few weeks later I got to call him and go, "Guess who I am watching on the surveillance video with a sledgehammer and the world's most recognizable sweatshirt?" Story 27. In civil claims, it is a bit different, but clients still lie with some regularity. In my experience, it is most common at the beginning of a claim. I did not do anything wrong, that never happened, I have never heard of that before, I do not know this person, I never signed a contract, the check was sent, etc. The main difference is that lying tends to hurt their case and make things much more expensive for them if they are a defendant, or less likely to succeed if they are a plaintiff. So the immediate cost is much higher and more apparent. If a client says, "I am not negotiating a settlement, I never had a contract with them," and then I get sent a copy of a signed contract, they have an immediate problem. Now I have blown a chance to settle and damaged our credibility with opposing counsel. I am going to have to spend more time working up the case, more legal fees will accrue, and you still owe the money. But most of the conversation will be centered around the fact that this screws them, not me. Most people learn that lesson the first time. If they insist on pushing forward with something false, you are not going to help them do that. And yes, sometimes you withdraw from a client as a result. You can usually tell pretty quickly when you are dealing with someone like that, and it is usually no great loss when they leave. Story 28. Not me, but my mentor, a lawyer, handled a divorce matter. The wife claimed the husband had abused her during their marriage, which he whispered to my mentor was absolutely not true. During his testimony, my mentor asked, "At any point in the marriage, did you lay your hands on your wife?" He responded, "One time we were having an argument and I held her down on the couch until she stopped arguing with me." My mentor was shocked, as he had never mentioned this, apparently not considering it abuse. The judge gave the wife more money as a result, and the husband was baffled. My mentor was furious, especially since she thought the case was in the bag, given the wife had abandoned the kids to run off with a lover, and the husband was seen as a great dad and community figure. Story 29. We represented a company in a lawsuit over a contract to sell a business that owned several franchises. After spending 10 to 20 hours discussing the case with the client's representative, during a deposition 6 months in, opposing counsel tore him apart. While debriefing the client post-deposition, he mentioned, "Well, when opposing counsel represented us before, It turned out opposing counsel had previously represented both the plaintiff and our clients in a failed attempt to purchase the exact same business. Information we were unaware of. We filed a motion to disqualify opposing counsel the next day, but the judge ruled we had waived disqualification by waiting too long. This still bothers me. Story 30. I had a client falsify documents that I then submitted as exhibits, believing them to be genuine. It was a civil matter involving a corporation, and I was unaware the documents were faked. During the case, opposing counsel discovered the forgery and revealed it in front of the judge. It was mortifying, but fortunately, opposing counsel did not think we were aware, so I faced no personal sanctions. The client lost the case and had to pay the other side's legal fees. We billed hourly, and they did not argue the bill, recognizing their culpability, though I never knew who in the company altered the documents. Story 31. In Big Law, I represented a skilled nursing home that fired a human resources director for, quote, performance issues and insubordination. After $150,000 in fees, I received discovery from my client, which included about 20 smoking gun emails showing they fired her for engaging in protected activity. I told the client all that was left was the number of zeros on the check they were going to write. Story 32. Before I became a lawyer, I worked for a family law guy. I remember him yelling at a client the day before a hearing, telling him he cannot tell the judge that his wife deserved a beating. The client said he understood, but that was the lie. He did not. During the hearing, in front of a female judge, he went on a highly harmful rant, got fined for not shutting up when told, and got a way worse deal in the divorce. It was a shit show, and while you do not lose divorce cases per se, his actions significantly harmed his outcome. Story 33. I was working as appointed counsel for a municipal court misdemeanor theft case. My client was accused of stealing cologne from Walmart with his baby in the cart. He said it must have slipped down next to her while walking around, which seemed reasonable. However, during his testimony, he volunteered that he put the cologne in the seat with the baby, information I learned at the same time as the prosecutor. I had told him it was a bad idea to testify for this reason, but he did, and the judge found him guilty after that, causing us to lose the case. Story 34. This would have caused us to lose the case if I had not seen the footage and dropped the case. The client said she had fallen because of a puddle in a big box store that was unmarked and not cleaned up. She has injuries and treatment, so that is good. I send the demand and we get back video footage of the event from the big box store. The client did not tell me that she had her tiny dog with her in the cart. The puddle she slipped in was her own dog's pee. Story 35. The husband, undergoing radiation and chemotherapy for late-stage cancer and in poor physical condition, claimed he was 45 miles away at the time of the alleged incident, supported by photos on his phone. I analyzed the photos, verified the metadata was unaltered, and confirmed the global positioning system coordinates embedded in the photos placed the husband 45 miles from the alleged assault location, with timestamps within 3 minutes of the wife's claim. During court, I testified to the originality and location data of the photos, showing they documented the husband's fall injuries before going to the emergency room. The judge questioned the wife, who was representing herself, about continuing the case, and she responded dismissively, muttering profanities, which the judge heard. The lawyer later informed me that the wife narrowly avoided contempt and perjury charges, and the husband received everything he asked for in the divorce, while the wife got nothing. Story 36. This is a special education case. The mother and school were fighting about services. We got new assessments that backed up the mother's claims. The local school did not have the right services, so we arranged a transfer to a larger school not too far away, a good public transit route. Some extracurriculars the kid was excited about. She goes to enroll him in school, says they have a problem with paperwork. Thinking the transfer info just did not get there yet, I take a copy and head down there. No, they won't enroll him because 1. Not his legal name. 2. She is not his legal mom. It turns out, she was the best friend forever of a mother who was pregnant and about to be incarcerated for substance trafficking. The best friend forever says, "Can you take my baby while I am in jail? I will get him as soon as I am out." She and her husband say sure. They sign a piece of notebook paper. 12 years later. Shaking my head. You have to think, how did they manage to navigate school and medical stuff for 12 years with no legal custody paperwork? They had just been using an assumed last name of the pseudo-adoptive couple, and, like me, no one had asked. It was only that the school had moved to an online system that checked Social Security numbers against other databases that it was caught. Anyway, the birth mom and dad were still alive and still in a lot of trouble. They consented to the couple that raised him adopting. The kid missed a week of school while I convinced them that he fit under a homeless youth school stability statute.